My name is Eswell, and today I'm here to tell you about how I almost died 5 years ago. Or rather, how I was almost killed 5 years ago by this guy named Al. Now, when I was a child, I used to hear stories about Al all the time. My uncles used to hang out with him, but because of his standing in society, Al doesn't have access to a lot of children. As a matter of fact, some of my friends, they would talk about Al. One of my friends said, Al put a monkey on his dad's back. I didn't know what that meant. When I became a teenager, a lot more people started to experiment with Al and his dastardly ways. Now, one thing about Al that I know for sure is that he loves to party. He's a complete party animal. He can turn any event into a shindig, but he's never around for the consequences. He never sticks around when the cops come, and this guy is a complete ghost when it comes to paying the piper. Now, Al, he's usually categorized like ghosts as a spirit, but we'll get into that later. About 85% of my friends had spent time with Al by my late teens. But me, on the other hand, I was a goody two-shoes, too pure to party with Al. That was until shortly after my 22nd birthday. And like everybody said, he was the life of the party. Fast forward to April 9th, 2016. I was the lead singer of a band, and on days that I didn't work, I moonlighted at a ramen restaurant where I worked as a front desk attendant. One day, it was a Saturday, and my good friend Robbie was having an art show. So I asked my boss, Jeff, hey, can I go to Robbie's art show instead of working closed tonight? I was supposed to close the restaurant, and Jeff said, you can go to the art show if you make a promise to come back to close and lock up the doors and help out with the evening staff. I said, sure thing, thanks, and I left. Once I arrived at the art show, it was phenomenal. The attendance was great, the art was amazing, and there were even hors d'oeuvres. Cocktails were served. Turns out Al was there too. And since we were old friends, I decided to hang out with him just a little bit. By the time I left the art show and I was supposed to be headed back to the ramen restaurant, I was greeted by a lot of different faces that I hadn't seen in months, some even years. And they all wanted to hang out with me that night. The first invited me to a bar. Al was already there. Everybody was hanging out with him there. And I decided, hey man, let me jump in and party with Al. Why not, right? So we're partying and partying. I'm hanging out with my good friends, and I was invited that night across the street to another bar. I was supposed to go back to the ramen restaurant to close the store, especially by this time. I should have gone back, but the party was too live, and Al was like, come on man, let's just go. So I was like, why not? Let's go to the other bar. This turned out to be a really bad decision, because not only was Al really reckless at the other bar, he was everywhere. He was all over all the girls in the bathroom. He's holding their hair while they're throwing up. It was just a bad time. I realized after a very short time at the second bar that I should not be there, and my time with Al had to come to an end. So I left that bar and went to my car to head home. I'm thinking in my mind, I'm confident enough, this is a great time. I start heading up the road toward the highway. As I'm traveling home on a main road, major university campus, during spring quarter at 11:30 p.m. Big social crowd outside. I fall asleep behind the wheel. I didn't know I was awake until I heard a big boom, and I'm trying to control my car, which is now completely hard to drive, and I'm steering it from the sidewalk onto the street. As I'm driving, there are these weird sparks coming up from the front of the road. Suddenly, out of the blue, I see these party lights behind me. It's the police. And for the first time in my life, with those lights behind my car, I felt relieved. Finally, somebody can help me make some sense of all this. Why are sparks coming from the front of my car? What's going on? What was that big boom? So many of my unanswered questions were answered when the arresting officers told me I was under arrest. The officers were responding to sparks that were flying from the front of my car at night because as I went to sleep, I traveled onto the sidewalk on High Street, hit a fire hydrant, which lodged itself into the bumper of my car, and then I moved back onto the road, and the fire hydrant is scraping the road as I'm driving and throwing sparks left and right and left and right. It must have looked like a fireworks show. It was a mess. But all I was concerned about, one of the things that I asked the first officer, "Hey officer, where's Al?" He said, "Who? You're driving this car by yourself, sir." "What do you mean? Al has been here this whole time. He's been here the whole night. He was at Robbie's art show. He was at this bar I went to. He was at this other bar that I just left. Are you kidding me? What do you mean there's no Al? Is he okay? Is he safe?" Again, the officer looked at me and just shook his head. He's thinking, this kid is a lost cause. At that point, I knew I was screwed. After performing my field sobriety tests and failing miserably, I was put in the back of a car and taken home. My court date was set for trial, my car was an impound, and I was dropped off at my house by the police, dejected. As I sobered up, I quickly realized it was all my fault. That night would not have happened had I kept my word with Jeff and gone straight back to the ramen restaurant to close with the closing staff. However, because of partying with Al, I lost so much. And to date, after almost dying, I have spent over $11,000 to recoup all of my losses, all of my fines, all of my court costs, and all of the damage to my car, which was completely totaled by the accident. Knowing that I could have been dragging a body under my Acura instead of a fire hydrant, I was completely sickened. As I got my car out of impound a few days later, I noticed that they actually put the fire hydrant itself in the passenger seat of my car, as if to say, "You earned it, kid, here's your reward." I still have that fire hydrant to this day, and it serves as a reminder that my life and the lives of others are much more important than Al or any of his antics. Some of my friends, some of my family members, and my closest loved ones are actually having a battle with Al right now and his influence on their lives. They're trying to get him out, but he's not the kind of friend that's easy to get rid of. Very, very overbearing, and he makes you forget who you are. Al can also change your personality. He can make you turn on your friends and family, and his voice becomes the most important voice in your life. Ever since Al's attempt on my life, I've been on a rampage to make sure that he never claims the life of anyone that I love. If you don't know by now, Al is alcohol. And in moderation, he can be a decent guy, but excessive alcohol use is the bane of my existence. And as a survivor, I'm happy to tell you that you can beat Al too. I just read a recent report. It told me that Al, in the United States alone, annually claims about 95,000 lives. That's about 250 plus people dying daily, all because they wanted to have a good time with Al. To be honest, that's not fair. So today, I want you to make a pledge. If you ever hang out with Al, make sure that your interaction is minimal. You're in the driver's seat until you're not. Remember, if you plan to drink, do not drive. And if you plan to drive, don't drink. Don't be prideful like I was. Up until that accident, I had never used a rideshare app in my life. I thought, hey, I got a car, I have my own car keys, I can get home anytime. Don't be like me. Download Lyft, Uber, or any rideshare program that you trust, and make sure that you have a safe ride home and a plan to get there before you take your first sip. Al can only influence your life if you let him, and only to the extent that you let him. And lastly, I say with love, if you need any help or someone just to talk to and vent, reach out to me. I'm not perfect, but I've been through it and luckily have survived, which is a great thing to be able to say on the other side of this journey. You have plenty of support, including myself. Please reach out if you're having a struggle with Al, and just know that we are a bigger influence than Al could ever be. I will never let Al have a greater influence over my life than myself. I will never let Al claim the lives of any of my friends so much as I can help it. And I will always be there for you when you're ready to be above the influence of Al. Thank you.